President-elect Tinubu arrives Nigeria after 1 month away. Inspector General of Police launches probe into Adamawa resident electoral commissioner's role in controversial poll. He's heavily compromised. Labour Party says suspended national youth leader can't speak for the party. And outside of Nigeria, countries evacuate citizens from Sudan as fighting escalates. Azamio to resume anti-government protests in Kenya on Tuesday, May the 2nd. Nigeria is some 33 days away from the inauguration of a new administration with President-elect Bola Tinubu. He will inherit a country that is facing challenges and struggles on several fronts. So as we enter into the final days of the Muhammadu Buhari administration, tonight we take a critical look at the state of the Nigerian nation. My guests tonight are Jide Johnson, a public affairs analyst, and Jide Ojo, a public affairs analyst. You're welcome to Politics HQ. I'm Tolulokwe Adileru Balogun. 1 month after he left the shores of the country, President-elect Bola Tinubu is back in town, in Abuja, in the country. Tinubu arrived in Abuja, Nigeria's federal capital territory, from France on Monday afternoon. There are immediate issues that the president-elect must address in the coming days. Tinubu, to be inaugurated in just over a month's time, is expected to weigh in on the leadership tussle surrounding Nigeria's incoming 10th National Assembly. Outgoing President Muhammadu Buhari has been blamed for setting Nigeria backwards, despite his insistence that he has improved the state of the country. There is a lot to unpack on what Nigeria looks like and currently what it will be ahead of the swearing in of a new administration. Both my guests tonight are public affairs analysts. I'm joined by Jide Ojo and Jide Johnson. Gentlemen, welcome to Politics HQ.
My pleasure.
It's a pleasure to be with you.
Thank you so much. All right. So let's start the conversation with what is possibly the trending story in town, because President-elect is actually a term right now that's trending on Nigerian social media, and that's the return of President-elect Tinubu back to Nigeria. Now, his month-long absence has raised issues once again about the state of his health and also his capacity to do the job of president. There are Nigerians who are worried that he may not be up to the job, and there are others that said he's not yet president. He has every single right to be gone for a month and do whatever he wants to do, and then come back and get ready to, of course, take over things. Is there much ado over what shouldn't be an issue? Mr. Johnson, let me start with you.
Well, it's important for him to take the break which he took, if you consider the strenuous nature of the campaign for the presidential election in Nigeria. As far as I'm concerned, there's nothing wrong with him taking the break from that strenuous campaign. So, the only thing people had is that there are not constant communication with respect to where he's gone for his vacation and with respect to people citing him publicly. And that created a lot of room for a lot of conspiracy theorists to come up with different types of ideas with respect to whether he went for vacation, whether he went for medical treatment, and the rest of it. And judging from the past that we had with the present administration, where the president had had cause to travel many times on medical grounds, a lot of Nigerians have had this misgiving with respect to not getting information and appropriate communication with respect to the whereabouts or the daily activities of the president-elect. But in any case, he's not still being sworn in. He was elected, so he has the right to take a vacation after a long campaign.
Mr. Ojo, are you of the same thoughts as Jide Johnson? Of course, he references the past. We had the situation of the doctrine of necessity coming about because of former President Musa Yar'Adua. Then we also, of course, had the number of days that President Buhari has, in one way or the other, been absent from official duty, as we'll call it that, and some of the issues around whether or not he successfully brought the vice president in to stand in for him, or there was a lacuna and there was a vacuum. So all of those kind of things seems to have been brought up again by President-elect Tinubu's month-long absence. What do you think?
Well, good evening, Nigerians. It's a pleasure to be on your show. I think it's still in order to say happy Salah holiday. For me, it's much ado about nothing. Somebody ran 150 days of campaigns for the first time under the Electoral Act 2022, Section 94, subsection 1. Campaigns for 2023 elections ran for 150 days. This man is in his 70s, and having weathered that campaign with all the post-election hula baloo, he decided to take some rest a bit outside of the country. Issue of doctrine of necessity, issue of transferring power to the vice president hasn't come in this regard because they are yet to be inaugurated. And those who are calling to question his health, while they have their rights to do so, I'm very sure there's none of us in our 50s, 60s, and 70s who do not have one health issue or the other that we are contending with. Even a child of 20 today could be battling with diabetes and hypertension as young as 20. I recall a Big Brother Africa program that was held some few years ago. Some Nigerians, very youthful Nigerians that were enlisted, when they went for medicals, they realized that they have health issues. And even for undergraduate students, when they go through medical checks before their admissions, some of them have debilitating health issues. How much more somebody in his 70s? And we have seen him during the campaigns. He weathered the campaigns successfully and is president-elect. It's not only for health issue he could have attended to in this month-long vacation. It's called vacation. But while he could have used the opportunity to attend to his health issue, there is also a possibility that he decided to give himself from political jobbers who will be putting him under pressure, wanting him to have some CVs so that they could start lobbying ahead of inauguration.
Okay.
So here you see him on the screen working on head, looking fresh, much more reinvigorated. So, like I said, much ado about nothing.
All right.
We should wish him well ahead of inauguration.
So much ado about nothing. So there is something else that we should probably look at, because there is an ado about that, and that is the challenges to his victory. So we're now on the path to the president-elect's inauguration, but that inauguration is still facing some challenges to his electoral victory. But there are those who now think that it's time for opponents to sheathe their swords and work together. So former governor of Enugu State, Chimaroke Inamani, is one of those. He believes that the Labour Party's candidate, Peter Obi, should drop his petition against Tinubu's victory and rather work with him. He's also described Obi's petition as being dead on arrival, and that Obi should do this for the sake of the Igbo. Now, his comments have really generated a lot of controversy, and as is anyone's right in this election or any election, you have a right to petition the court, you have a right to seek clarification, you have a right to challenge the victory. But we're here, a little over a month to the inauguration, still awaiting the Presidential Election Petition Tribunal to sit as well on the petitions, not just from Mr. Obi, but also from Atiku Abubakar, the PDP's presidential candidates, and as well as one or two other political parties. When we look at Inamani's suggestion at this point in time in Nigeria's political history, after this massive election for 2023, Is this a suggestion that you think could find some fertile ground? Mr. Johnson, let me start with you.
Well, everyone has a right to approach the court when you feel aggrieved with respect to anything, whether election materials, electoral issues, or property issues, or whatever. It's a fundamental right for you to seek redress through the court. And I think that Senator Chimaroke Nnamani is engaged in doublespeak. In one fold, he said he's dead on arrival. In another fold, he said, oh, he should withdraw his petition. Peter Obi is entitled to go to court if he feels aggrieved about the electoral process. So it's the fundamental right of every citizen, and it's also the fundamental right of every candidate in that particular election. And don't also forget that Chimaroke Nnamani, through his art for the APC candidate, now coming out to say that, well, in the interest of Igbo, he could have supported the candidate of the Labour Party, who happens to be his brother from the same political zone where he comes from. He didn't do that in the first instance, and is now talking about in the interest of Igbo that Peter Obi should withdraw his petition. I don't agree with him. Peter Obi has every right to go to approach the court to seek redress, and it is left for the court to determine whether his petition is valid or is invalid. So as far
I think we're having some technical issues there with Mr. Jide Johnson. I'll come to you, Mr. Ojo, because there is a part of this particular series of statements that the former senator made that's quite interesting. He says that it should be done for the sake of the Igbo, and that the Igbo are ready to join hand in hand, basically, with the Tinubu administration. I'm paraphrasing here, not quoting him direct. But he pointed out that this petition is dead on arrival, that he does not, referring to Obi, have the spread or national appeal. His appeal to non-electoral matters is to demarcate the president-elect and besmirch his reputation. And that really does also, in a way, get to the hearts of some questions that people have about the petition tribunal in terms of, will this decision be made on technicalities or on possibly the actual points around the Electoral Act and, of course, the elections? But, Mr. Ojo, when it comes to the statements that the former senator made in regards to Obi dropping this for the sake of the Igbo to be able to move forward with Tinubu's administration and possibly align for further presidential elections, maybe in 2027. What do you make of those remarks?
Again, former governor and now Senator Chimaroke Nnamani, Eban, as is popularly called in Enugu, is entitled to his opinion. He, like Governor Professor Chukwuma Soludo, have come out openly to say, look, Peter Obi, you are progressing in error. This your ambition will not win election. And rather than contesting, that's Professor Chukwuma Soludo, Governor of Anambra State, that he should actually have supported either Atiku Abubakar or Bola Tinubu. You recall that long missive that Professor Soludo wrote to Peter Obi, which was made public in November of 2022. Now, Chimaroke Nnamani Ebano is also towing that line for the sake of Igbos, so that Igbos don't lose out completely. The Peter Obi should withdraw his petition. Well, it's a counsel, it's an advice which Peter Obi is not duty bound to take. And under our jurisprudence in the Electoral Act, two people, let me put it that way, have locus to challenge an election. One is the political party that fielded the candidate, and two is the candidate of the party. So you recall very recently, my sister, the Supreme Court decision that restored the so-called mandate of President of the Senate, Ahmed Lawa. In that, after losing at the Court of Appeal, he said he was not going to contest the ruling of the decision of the Court of Appeal, but his political party, APC, decided to go to the Supreme Court to challenge Machina. That's in the Yobe North Senatorial District dispute. So what I'm saying invariably is that even if Peter Obi were to withdraw his petition today for the sake of Igbos, they said they are Igbos, they are not Igbos. I don't know why we always refer to them as Igbos. They said they are Igbos. Even if he does that for the sake of the Igbos, will Labour Party also agree to withdraw the petition? Because Labour Party has a council at the Election Petition Tribunal, just the same way as Peter Obi as an individual, as a candidate of Labour Party in the presidential election, also have a council. So even if Peter withdraws, the party, Labour Party, can say, no, we are still pursuing this case. I will see it to the logical conclusion. I am of the considered view that let the cases have been filed, let the court decide, let the Election Petition Tribunal decide on the merit or otherwise of Peter Obi's petition. Whether it's debt on arrival is not for Chimaroke Namani to determine. Even if he were to be a lawyer, which I know he isn't, he's not a lawyer and he doesn't know the merit of the petitions that have been filed at the Court of Appeal, which is the court of first instance in this situation.
Yes.
And it will enrich our electoral jurisprudence if a court of competent jurisdiction is able to rule one way or the other. Let me cite the example. One of the ground of petition is that Tinubu did not win 25% of votes in the FCT.
Yes.
That's the Federal Capital Territory. Some are of the opinion that the Supreme Court has previously ruled on that it does not matter that FCT, we that are in Federal Capital Territory, do not have special status, and that once somebody has a minimum of 2/3 of votes in 25 states, is home and dry. But Peter Obi has questioned that to say, look, and you recall that was the basis upon which his running mate, Dr. Datsi Ahmed, had challenged that it would be wrong for Tinubu to be inaugurated because he didn't qualify, not having gotten 25% of votes in FCT. And then some lawyers are with him on that. Some are saying no. Yes. It does not matter. We that are in Abuja do not have special status. We don't have golden card. And that in as far as Tinubu had majority of valid vote cast, and he is also able to win in more than 25 states, because at the end of the day, he has 25% of votes in 29 states. Unfortunately, he did not have 25% in the Federal Capital Territory. So it would be interesting to have the Supreme Court lay that to rest. Even if the issue of whether there are fraud, there are rigging and here and there, even if that will be determined in favor of Asiwaju one way or the other, that point of law about section 134. Sub 2 of the Constitution needs to still be determined anew, so that we know exactly that will become a precedent for subsequent election.
And I think the point you make is a very valid one, because it's the conversation many have had that at this point, the Supreme Court should make a judgment on whether it is and or somewhat in favor of Abuja's situation. There is Abuja giving the status or the weight of a state when it comes to determining who Nigeria's next president is. Mr. Johnson, I want to bring you back in because the president-elect has landed, but he's not the only one who's going to be inaugurated on the 29th of May. There are going to be inaugurations across the states and for also members of the National Assembly and beyond as well. So we know the All Progressives Congress has held on to the National Assembly, even even though there are more parties in this incoming 10th National Assembly than Nigerians have seen in a while. So there's going to be a bit of lobbying across the aisles, and we hope to see some of that really playing out in favor of Nigerians. But the issue of zoning of the National Assembly leadership has been something that's polarized the two chambers of the parliament along regional and religious lines. So we have the Southeast and the South-South that are both laying claim to the Senate presidency, and they're saying this is to ensure some regional and religious balance, ensuring the emergence of a Christian Senate president and also balance the same faith presidential ticket of the APC. Then you also have this position of the Speaker of the House of Representatives, which is also in contention. And someone who seemed to be very quiet in this regard has been Ahmad Lawan. He's won re-election. He's the current Senate president, hasn't said much about whether or not he wants to be returned to that seat. And it seems that religion and region may be in his way, in the way of his return per se, to that post. What do you make of what's playing out right now? The expectation is that there should be a National Executive Committee meeting of the APC, which will lay out what the party plans for the leadership of the National Assembly. The president-elect is back, and so we should have some direction in the coming days. But what do you make of what's playing out?
Well, as far as I'm concerned, the election of principal officers of the National Assembly should be based on competence, character, and experience. That's my take when it comes to the legislature. However, our case is different in Nigeria. In Nigeria, it is based on zoning. So it is the zoning of these offices. And you begin to ask this question. When people begin to argue for this, it's just to satisfy their selfish interest. For example, the Southeast had Senate presidency. The Northeast has had Senate presidency. What has the one Senate presidency, what has it done for Yobe? What has it been able to reduce the level of banditry in Yobe State, for example? What has Senate presidency done for the Southeast? Or what has the 12 years of David Mark, what was 12 years of David Mark as Senate president? What did he do for Benue State, for instance? Has he been able to solve the problem of Benue State? You see, when people talk about zoning and the rest of it when it comes to the National Assembly, it's just for their own personal, I don't want to use the word selfish, it's for their own personal interest. It's not in the overall interest of the region or of their zone. The legislature is meant to provide a check. In a presidential system of government, the legislature is meant to provide a check on the excesses of the executive. It's meant to provide a balance. However, we have seen a situation in Nigeria whereby the executive, either at the state level, in actual sense, the State House of Assembly are just an extension of the office of the governors in many of the states. Likewise, we have seen the turn of event with the legislature at the national level to be an extension of the office of the president. That's why you see that the party that has won in 2023 has not been able to provide a direction because everybody is waiting for the coming of the president-elect to give directive with respect to where the office of the Senate president will go to, where the office of the speaker will go to. And by protocol, these are the third and the fourth in line in terms of order of protocol in Nigeria. So when people talk about balancing it based on religion, balancing it based on religion, balancing it based on ethnicity, balancing it based on zone, in this present administration that we have, the president is a Muslim, the vice president is a Christian, the Senate president is a Muslim, the Speaker of the House of Rep is a Muslim. That's Fedi Bajamia. In actual sense, he had to go to Mecca for him to be elected, for him to prove that is. So, as far as I'm concerned, when people bring the issue of this religion, it's for their own selfish interest. In whose interest are these people working? What we should be looking at is how those we are going to elect as the Senate president and as the Speaker of the House of Representatives are going to do the normal legislative function. They are going to provide oversight function. They are going to curb on the excesses of the executive to ensure that they work in the interest of the people. But a situation whereby you have the president, the executive, playing the dominant role in electing who becomes the Senate president, in electing who becomes the Speaker of the House of Reps, what you will have is a rubber stamp legislature. which is the type of legislature we have in most of the states, House of Assembly, and which is one of the accusations a lot of people have leveled against the ninth National Assembly.
Yes. All right. So before we go for a break, Mr. Ojo, I want to get your thoughts on that, but slightly in a different way, because this 10th National Assembly coming in, of course, the PDP has its number. The Labour Party also has its numbers, particularly for the Senate. And then we have one or two other parties who have numbers as well. As I said, introducing this particular question, there's an expectation that there should be more cross-aisle or at least attempts in which other parties are brought along. Even with this National Assembly leadership tussle that we're seeing, there is going to have to be some kind of conversation with the other parties, the opposition parties that are also in the National Assembly, particularly in the Senate. As we look ahead to this new administration as well as to the 10th National Assembly, in recent times, Nigerians will remember, of course, Senator Ahmad Lawan, who is the current Senate President, as well as former Senate President, the former governor of of Kwara State, Senator Saraki, as well, and how it seemed to be a fictitious relationship. So we've seen two examples in recent times of a National Assembly that seems to be working hand in glove and a National Assembly that seems to also be able to really stand its feet on its checks and balances role, particularly with the executive, legislature, and of course the judiciary. What do you expect with the opposition parties that are going to be in the 10th National Assembly? Should we be seeing more of a compromise, or do you expect it will be same of the same?
There's no way it will be same of the same, particularly on issues that needs two-thirds majority. APC may be able to get away with a simple majority to decide on issues. The last time I checked, APC had 60 senators out of 109. That's after the after the conclusion of the supplementary election on April 15. So if it has 60 senators, it then means that for simple majority, it could decide, that's provided all the APC members are unanimous behind the party position or the position of the executive, they can still get a lot of things done as a bloc. But we know when politics is, when we are down to politics, sometimes even members, you can have enemies within, particularly if they want to dig deep. Recall that the Saraki Senate presidency came with a cost to APC, where they have to share power with the opposition. While Saraki was president of the Senate, Igbokwe for the fourth time or thereabout had to be made the deputy president of the Senate. So it was a power sharing agreement. However, under the current situation, for many things, I am of the considered view that no executive, no president worth his salt would just want the National Assembly or the State Assembly to do what they like. Because if you don't reach out to them and work collaboratively together, they can actually make your work very difficult. As the saying goes in local parlance, a leper may not be able to milk a cow, but he can spill the milk. Many things they kill in view. Mark my word, they kill in view. If you want to go, sometimes if you don't lobby, if the executive refuses to lobby the National Assembly, whether it's about debts, whether it's about appointments, whether it's about confirmation of certain nominees, whether it's even about certain executive bills, it's a global practices that you have to lobby. Right now, you can see what the U.S. Congress is making Joe Biden to see after the midterm election, where Kevin McCarthy is going in one direction about the debt ceiling of the U.S., and then the Democrats is going the other way. So that's why in Nigeria and for most countries of the world, the executive usually will take interest in who emerges not only as the president of the Senate and Speaker of the House of Reps, they will also be interested in the leaders of opposition. So you want to know who is going to be the minority leader, deputy minority leader, and the leadership generally of the minority groups. Because when issues come down to issues around 2/3 majority, which APC does not have at present, it needs to reach out to the opposition element. And if you want to follow due process and constitutionalism, unless APC is able to poach, and I know they will try that, they will try to poach particularly from the minority opposition groups. They want to poach to see if they can take their tally to 2/3 majority, which will make things much easier for them. And it's not it is not unexpected that, for instance, now some of the Labour Party members elect or senator elect, the field that is currently brewing within the Labour Party with the leadership is a fertile ground for some of them to even defect. According to Section 68(1)(g) of the Constitution, if there is a faction within your party at the national level, you may use that as an opportunity to defect. So I'm sure APC will want to see how much opposition, senators or opposition as members elect can be persuaded, lobbied, or cajoled, or seduced, or wooed to join the ruling party, because they want to target 2/3 majority in order to facilitate whatever they will need to do during this 10th National Assembly.
And it's interesting you mentioned debt. We're following also closely how the debt ceiling conversation in the U.S. is happening, because it can have, of course, economic global ramifications for countries like Nigeria. But debt is going to be part of the conversation we pick up when we come back from the break, because the same day that President-elect Tinubu returned to the country, more news about Nigeria's debts also came to the fore. We'll pick up this conversation after the break. Now, the same day that President-elect Bola Tinubu returned to Nigeria is the same day that news broke of the country's debt to the World Bank, rising to about 121.46% under President Muhammadu Buhari. Now, this is just part of what Nigeria owes in total. We're told that Nigeria's debt to the World Bank is about 6 trillion out of the over 46.25 trillion naira that Nigeria and its 36 state governments, as well as the Federal Capital Territory, owe as of Q4 2022. Debt servicing overtook revenue also in 2022, and many economists are worried about Nigeria's fiscal position. Now, this will put the Tinubu administration in a tough spot financially, as well as challenges with crude oil production, high inflation, and high unemployment as well. So now we have an incoming president who is a former governor of Lagos State, a large state, the commercial capital of Nigeria, a dominant city and state that many say would be one of the largest economies on the continent if, in fact, it was a country. So let's take this conversation from there. Mr. Johnson, when we look at Tinubu's time as governor of Lagos State, do you think that gives us ideas on how he will handle the economic issues that are going to be almost top 5 front and center on his desk as soon as he is sworn in as president?
Well, I don't know what we want to talk about, whether it's the tax policy or it's infrastructural development that we want to talk about that will bring. Sometimes I think that the issue of Lagos State is bloated and is not given accurate reporting. I grew up in the Ikeja area of Lagos, and I knew a lot of my friends that worked in companies that were in the Ikeja Industrial Estate, Obakran to be precise, around Obakran in Ikeja. I usually challenge journalists and my students to take a visit. Anytime people talk about the economy of Lagos, I ask them to take a visit, come to Ikeja Industrial Estate, what used to be Ikeja Industrial Estate, and then go to the Igbokwe Industrial Estate and look at the site which we have those companies. What has happened to those companies in the last 24 years? What has happened to? Because when people talk about the economy of Lagos, they talk about the ability of Lagos to generate revenue from taxes. And in Lagos, you have multiple taxes, multiple taxation. And in Lagos, you have a lot of agencies, duplication of agencies doing same function, collecting revenue from the citizen from that function. So when people talk about that, I usually take a back seat and then try to have a second look at what they are talking. If you bring that type of economy to Nigeria, that means that Nigerians should be ready for every tax burden. Nigerians should be ready for every tax burden. Nigerians should be ready for a lot of companies departing Lagos, going to Ogun State, and then later moving to Ghana. If that's, we are talking about the true economy of Lagos under that administration, another successive administration, which we have in Lagos State. In terms of what Nigeria will generate in terms of GDP and growth, definitely, and money that we generate, revenue that we generate from taxes, it will increase. No doubt about that. But the effect, the overall effect on the human capital development, the human development index on an average Nigeria, and you situate the revenue that Lagos State has generated with the human development index of an average Lagosian, you discover that we journalists, we have not done good to an average Nigerian in reporting the economy of Lagos. The economy of Lagos is the economy of what I call the elitist economy. It's not the economy, it's not a populist economy that affects the largest percentage of the people in the state. That's my view. I might be wrong. I might be wrong, but that's my view, that's my opinion, that's my interpretation of the economy of Lagos. Because tell me the industries, people will say, okay, now Dangote has come to Lagos. With the exception of Dangote refinery, tell me the industries. Where are the Dunlops of this world? Where are the Nigerite? All of those companies in those areas. If you understand what I'm talking about, then you understand that the investment we have made in Lagos is making investment on how to collect revenue from people through one form of taxation. We have not made investment, critical investment in industrialization, in providing the platform and avenue which that will give tax reliefs to investors to invest and employ people. Most of the industries we have in Lagos, you know what their premises have turned to? Their premises have turned to either malls or churches, church building or event center. That's my view.
So, Mr. Ojo, when you hear what Mr. Johnson has to say, because we know that a large part of President-elect Tinubu's campaign was on his antecedents as his time of governor as Lagos State and also at the helm of affairs for his political party. Antecedents are something that people will vote on, and I think some did vote on that. But Nigeria is at a very critical point in time. He's becoming president with high unemployment, high inflation, rising interest rates that may continue into the year, expectations that unemployment may cross the 40% mark this year alone. We're still struggling with crude oil production as well. We have loans coming from everywhere. And there are concerns that Nigeria, as the largest economy on the African continent, not necessarily in debt distress, but will struggle in the coming years because we simply just don't have enough revenue. Our GDP and our birth rates seem to be galloping almost side by side. So we're not even growing enough to be able to cater for the population that Nigeria has. And we're preparing for a census in the coming days. So when we look at his economic antecedents, what do you think it tells us about what his time might be economically as president?
I've said this time and again, and this is well documented in my column in the Punch newspapers, that incoming president will not have an honeymoon. Say for the sake of boosting his CV, I really do not know why Asiwaju Bola Tinubu will even want to be president of Nigeria. Beyond ego boosting, because the situation is so terribly bad. I mean, look at the statistics you've rolled out. Our debt profile is humongous. Our, yes, they will tell you that debt to GDP is below 5%, but they won't tell you that debt to revenue is terrible. I mean, I was reading a few days ago, was it yesterday or a few days ago, that almost 90 naira out of every 100 we make is used to service debt. That's not even to pay. Our debt servicing portfolio in 2023 budget is in excess of 6 trillion. In fact, our debt servicing portfolio, our debt servicing envelope in 2023 is almost at par with our capital expenditure framework. So, and you need to look at the state of insecurity. When my brother, my namesake, was talking about Lagos and the deindustrialization of Lagos, it wasn't so much because Asiwaju failed as an individual and as a governor of Lagos. It is the governance at 3 tiers: federal, state, and local. Except for the just last month's alteration of the constitution, which has now enabled states to generate electricity. We have 68 items on the exclusive legislative list. Many of these things are not supposed to be there. Thankfully, Buhari, by acceding to the constitutional alteration, has removed 3: prison, railway, and electricity from the exclusive legislative list and put them under concurrent. Recall that Asiwaju Bola Tinubu, through ENRO, had wanted to do IPP to be able to generate, transmit, and distribute electricity in Lagos. But the federal government seems not to be in agreement with that, more so that it was in the opposition. And the industrialization of Lagos and all the entire country is not so much peculiar to Lagos. Yes, Lagos has access to airports, to seaports. The Lekki Export Processing Zone has come alive. And I believe that there will be many more investments in Lagos if the incentives are right. But what we need, my sister, what we need more to revamp this economy is to reduce the cost of doing business as well as reduce the cost of living. We need to reduce also the cost of governance. There are 3 different things I've mentioned. One, let me break it down. The cost of doing business is very important. He alluded, Dr. Jide Johnson alluded to multiple taxation in Lagos and all of that. That's part of the incentive why people will, because one, you have to pay all manner of taxation, but it's also not peculiar to Lagos.
Yeah.
I recall when the 5% tariff increment was mooted last year by Minister of Finance as a way of increasing the revenue generation of federal government. The Telecommunication Association of Nigeria came out and said that they are too taxed. They are paying close to over 40 taxes by federal, state, and local government revenue agencies. Over 40. And that additional 5% tariff on telecommunication, voice, and data will also worsen their performance in terms of revenue. So that's to tell you, and that's from federal government. We have also seen the increase in the value-added tax from initial 7% to, I think, 12.5% now, to be able to generate more funds. But assuming that we are able to reduce and restructure this country, restructure, by my own estimation, is, let's look at, do we need 360 members of House of Representatives?
Mr. Ojo.
Do we need Do we need 109 senators? Yes, I'm listening.
Okay, so I want to interrupt you there because having to deal with the amount of senators we have and House of Representatives members we have may be something outside of the president-elect's purview and his power. But you mentioned three things, and I want a very simple answer from you. You mentioned reducing the cost of doing business, reducing the cost of living, and reducing the cost of governance. Do you think these are things that, seeing what President-elect Tinubu did with Lagos State, even though there have been several governors after him, do you think these are things that you expect that he can handle and take on when he becomes president of Nigeria?
It wouldn't actually have to do that way back in 2007 when he left office. His government at that time was in opposition. I wouldn't know how I wasn't living in Lagos any longer, as at the time he was governor of Lagos. So whether he was able to reduce cost of governance in Lagos, that is not within my knowledge. But what I think he will need to do as incoming president is to see to it on how to reduce cost of governance. You know what I'm alluding to is not totally out of his control. If he introduced an executive bill to say, look, let's alter the constitution. Why, for instance, must we have 36 ministers minimally? Because of section 147 sub 3 of the constitution, which says that a president must appoint at least a minister from every state. At least, that's the word. That's why today Buhari has 43 ministers. It's in the constitution. The fact that every state house of assembly must have between 24 members minimum and 40 minimum, which is why a state like Bayelsa will need to subdivide 8 local governments into 3 to meet the minimum benchmark of 24 state house of assembly, and a state like Kano that has 44 local government will have to match some of the local government to be able to come down to 40. And I'm saying these are part of how you can reduce cost of governance. You don't need 36 ministers. U.S. government, United States, with about 300 million population, is running on 15 secretaries, which is the equivalent of ministers. 15 secretaries run the U.S. as a country. Why do we need 36? Why do we need 40 state house of assembly? Italy have reduced their own Senate. Some have even scrapped their Senate. I'm saying that is part of measure. I'm not saying that's the only one. But we need to improve revenue. We need to improve revenue. And that brings me to the issue of having to widen the tax base. Not to
Mr. Ojo, I have to interrupt you here.
More people
into the tax
to make more people to pay taxes.
Yes. Mr. Ojo, I apologize. I do have to interrupt you here because of time, and I want to hear from Mr. Johnson before we wrap up as well. There are a number of issues that the incoming president is going to have to deal with. There's also the fact that petrol subsidy. Nigeria has made no budgetary provisions for the subsidy beyond June, and June is just a few weeks away for us, but it's really literally almost the next day after he's sworn in as president of Nigeria. And there's a large conversation there. We've seen that last week, federal civil servants are announcing that they're going to get a 40% pay hike to prepare for the removal. We also, of course, heard, Nigeria getting an $800 million World Bank facility for palliatives, also ahead of the fuel subsidy removal. So, Mr. Johnson, I'll start with you as we wrap things up very quickly. When it comes to priorities, because it seems that everything in Nigeria is a priority. Security is a priority. The economy is a priority. Electricity is a priority. Subsidy removal, because of the fiscal position of the country, is a priority. When it comes to what the president should prioritize, in an order that you see will have knockdown effect on some of the other priorities as they may be, where do you see the president-elect focusing his top 3 moves when he comes into office?
I agree with the position of my big brother, Mr. Ojo. It's deregulation. Reduce the cost of governance. I agree with his position he took based on the question. I agree in totality with him. We need to reduce the cost of governance. It's important. There's a lot of wastages happening in government. 2, we need to deregulate this economy. You see, if we had not deregulated the broadcast industry in 1992, you and I would not be talking on News Central now. If we had not deregulated the telco sector, probably we would not be making this call. We will not be having this program via the internet platform provided by the telco services we are using. So the incoming administration needs to further deregulate this economy. Government has no business in business other than to regulate the environment with which people will do business. And like you also pointed out, there's the need for us to restructure. Uncle Joe said it earlier. There's a need for us to restructure. You see, the Constitution provides for each minister per each state. Each minister for each state. But the president has been asked 43. So if the Constitution provides for 36, we should have. In fact, I'm even suggesting that we should just have 12 ministers, either two from each of the geopolitical zones. That will reduce the cost of governance and a lot of wastages. And then the administration also need to be transparent. We don't even know whether we are paying subsidy or not paying subsidy. Because when the present president, when he was in opposition, he said if anybody is paying subsidy, they are deceiving us. So we don't even know the true picture. And there are some institutions that are super institutions like NNPC, institutions like CBN, all of these institutions, the incoming administration needs to bring transparency into this sector, so that we don't have institutions that are higher and bigger than the state. When all of these are put in place, I can assure you that we'll be starting on a good move. And then, you see, we spoke about the issue of deregulation or not deregulation and the issue of what the president could do. Now, in terms of constitutional amendment, you might be glad to know that it is states control, particularly states in the Southwest, Ogun State, Lagos State, and that did not approve local government autonomy. Can you believe it? Can you believe it? That when the Ninth Assembly made provisions to give autonomy to the local government, can you believe that it is Lagos State, Ogun State, and Ondo State, states that are claimed to be progressive in nature, states that have been clamoring that there should be autonomy for the local government, states that have accused Obasanjo for withholding local government resources by the state that did not. This administration that is coming in must focus on developing power, giving power back to the local government. We need to revive the local government. A lot of attentions are on the federal government and the state government. We need to devolve some of this power to the local government and reduce the cost of governance before we start to talk about removing petroleum subsidy or no petroleum subsidy. Subsidy, I don't even think we are paying petroleum subsidy because nobody has a true picture of what we are paying or whether we are paying or we are not paying.
All right. Because of time, we can't go further because both of you gentlemen have just opened up different avenues right now in terms of where this conversation can go for the president-elect. But something that did stick out to me from what Mr. Ojo said was why anyone would want to be president at this point in time in Nigeria's history. But we have a new president-elect, Bola Tinubu, former governor of Lagos State, and he is going to have a lot on his table and many, many people watching him in the coming days, weeks, months, and years into his administration. Jide Ojo and Mr. Jide Johnson, thank you so much for joining me tonight on Politics HQ.
It's a pleasure to share this platform with Uncle Ojo. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for joining me.
Have a wonderful day.
The same to you.